Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 109 of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography. Episode number 109 of Camera Position continues our multi-part conversation with Mary Virginia Swanson. Swanson, a noted photo consultant, author, impresario of photography's cheerleader. And if you've been listening along, you realize that she has some tremendous insights into the art of photography and the way artists practice photography. So in this episode, Swanson and I talk about public art and the opportunities for photographers displaying their work in spaces other than galleries. We also talk briefly about galleries and also about image size and the life of work that may not necessarily have a home on the wall. So here we are joining our conversation with Mary Virginia Swanson.
I think it's a fantastically interesting time for public art because there are so many different fabrication processes that photography can be adapted into. It's amazing to me what can be done in public art that we wouldn't have thought of 5 years ago, or weren't capable, I should say, of doing 5 years ago. Some of the work Martha Madigan's done, the public school in Queens, PS1 I think it is, a 3-story window with images, some are sandblasted, some fused between glass. There's the Magnolia Tapestries series of photographs by Chuck Close that literally are these amazing rugs that are fabricated with a digital adaptation to a jacquard looms in Belgium. Crazy. Completely crazy. If I were an artist if I were an artist today interested in an audience that could exist outside of the museum structure or the gallery structure, I would be exploring all the possibilities for fabrication of photography. And colleagues that are in public art programs, one in particular I think of at the City of Phoenix Public Art Program, is frequently telling me that the numbers of people applying for their calls for submissions, or call FRPs I should say, calls for proposals, there's so few photographers. And I think it's partly because our stereotype is that, my photographs can't be outside 24/7 for years on end. How will they be weatherproofed? How can we make this happen? And now we can. So I applaud the public art administrators who are really encouraging photographers to submit. So Martha Madigan on her website has a public art section, and this lab in Berkeley called Magnolia Editions. On their public art page, you can click on a project and they explain how it was fabricated. Artists we know like Rebecca Cummins, doing artist in residency programs at places like Pilchuck to learn to work with glass, and that's just fascinating to me to see where one's work will go when you take it outside. Susan K. Grant, our great colleague from Dallas, she has an entire transit station. She was awarded that project by the city of Dallas. They had, I think, 10 or 12 transit stations that were awarded individually to artists of all different scales. And it's fascinating. I'll have to show you the pictures of it. It's unbelievable. Working with engineers and architects and of course beginning with a dialogue with the community that lived there. And her transit station is Parkland Hospital stop.
So there might be people getting on and off there.
Yeah, absolutely there. It's a amazing point of connection for the community.
So everybody wants a gallery show. Everybody in the world wants a gallery show. What you're sort of saying is that while there are a limited number of galleries, there are an unlimited number of possibilities for putting your work in front of people's eyes, where it may not necessarily be the traditional gallery space that we think of with white walls and overhead spotlights.
And an object you can leave with. I mean, that is the challenge, isn't it? Galleries can sell something people can go home with. Public art isn't always packageable in that way, transportable. I think of the fabulous exhibition that Doug Aitken did at the Museum of Modern Art. Creative Times sponsored this installation, and it was 5 of his films projected on the outside of the museum, not the inside of the museum. We see the Billboard series along the High Line. So many different kinds of public art projects don't necessarily have an object for sale. And that's one of the challenges for the artist, because typically the money has to be raised to produce, or have the space donated, or have the materials donated. But if it were to be in a gallery, what does the gallery owner sell? What from that installation is packageable and sellable? It's a challenge for them. I remember Rebecca Cummins again with her piece. Her work is all about optics, and she had that wall of glasses with water in them at a certain place, and it was this fantastic installation that was curious and interesting with every change of light, which whatever perspective you viewed it from, inside, outside, all of it. A challenge for a dealer is there's nothing for sale from that. Are you could you install that in someone's home? I suppose, but the care and feeding of that piece of artwork would be extensive, and not someone that a private collector might take on.
Does that then translate into some way of the artist positing another object or set of objects that could be for sale that are derivative of that work,
or might be,
or a springboard for the next project because of the notoriety that comes from Project A?
Or the drawings, as we see in Christo, for example, the drawings towards the making of that piece. Those may be the objects that are for sale. A video, perhaps, of the making of it can be an object for sale. But when we're talking about commercial representation, there has to be something that's for sale. Whether it's a Richard Serra sculpture that has particular complications in movement and storage, but there's still something for sale. We see his drawings now being sold as well. That amazing Steidl book of the Richard Serra drawings, if you haven't had a chance to see it. I have
seen that.
Gorgeous. Gorgeous. And again, give us a window into the creative mind of that person and their process.
That Serra show that was at
Pace, I think. Pace.
Yeah. It was an incredible thing. And it was one of the things I thought about is like, okay, what life does this piece or set of pieces have outside of this space that these things are installed in? But the answer is drawings, books, documentation.
For our generation that absorbed digital into our life not long ago, and certainly after many years of practice of long form recording and assigning filing systems to it, the barrage of imagery and the barrage of devices that it's coming in on, and the multiple storage spaces is a real challenge. And I look to those that are beginning their creative life with those tools to perhaps refine systems that we may later adapt.
Or that we may later wish we had adapted, but watch them sail off into the sunset with those systems already intact.
Yeah.
I was intrigued today to hear you tell a student, I was intrigued and actually really pleased to hear you tell a student that the work that she was making probably needed to be made with film.
Instead of digital. Oh, film,
I
feel strongly
about
that with that content. Yes.
I had never seen that work before. I thought that was terrific work.
This was for the audio audience. It was large prints of very abstract surfaces that could have been 1 or 2 inches. I didn't really ask about
some of them. I think were maybe 6 inches square.
Right, that were blown up
of subject that were enlarged to 3 by 4 feet.
Right, and it could have been distressed metal or
there was one that I loved. It was
surface.
Like little pieces of fungus and stuff on a wall. I just thought it was incredibly gorgeous. But
I just felt like before she invested more in large scale prints, that, and don't get me wrong, the work was very much in progress. I wasn't saying scrap this exhibition that you've already printed, but to stop right then and make sure, in fact, that it shouldn't have being captured with medium or large format film. What was the degree of precise replication she was seeking? Was that an issue or not? And I just thought it was time to just double check before making more big prints.
Before moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Is photography's gotten really big, size-wise. Do we care? Do we like it? Do we want it that big? Should photography be that big?
Well, of course, work should be in the scale that the artist feels best allows the audience access to their voice, their topic, their subject. That said, I see a lot of paper being wasted. And I don't know many people that live where they can invest in appropriate framing, $500 or $750 a frame, and then space to hang it and space to store it. So many people are making such big work that if it's not on the wall, it's a challenge for storage, without any question. Museum storage systems were, for photography anyway, and works on paper, were designed to be boxes that were on shelves, not massive pieces of plexiglass with an original print attached to it, stored vertically. And I just can't imagine the budgets that museum departments need to come up with to retrofit their storage systems.
I know the Art Institute of Chicago recently redid their entire vault system simply for that reason, that the work had not outgrown the square footage allotted to it. It had outgrown the way in which that square footage was being used, because they could no longer store the new acquisitions they were getting.
Isn't that something?
On the shelving units that held, as you say, a shelving unit that would hold 10 or 20 boxed folios
Right.
of portfolios of images.
In standard sizes.
Yeah, I think about the musician who chooses at some point in their life to play the flute, and their relief that they didn't end up playing the double bass.
Yeah.
They don't have
How do
to
you
buy
get that on an airplane?
They don't have to buy the Volkswagen or the Volvo station wagon
Yeah,
to carry
get
their
that in.
instrument around.
That's true.
Certainly I've made some very large pieces, and it is an issue. I mean, you saw them leaning up against the wall of my house.
Yeah.
Some of them, because I don't have a place to put them.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting that I have clients sometimes who ask me, "Can you make these really big?" And I say, "Well, yeah, I can make them really big." And then we'll bring a few big pieces to their home, and they've completely overestimated
What big means?
the capability of a wall to hold
Right.
a 40 by 60 inch framed piece.
Right, with some breathing room around
Yeah,
it.
and so they say, "Oh, maybe I didn't really want it that big."
Right.
In their head, the idea,
Right.
because they see big things in museums, and even these larger homes that are being built can't support that kind of size. So
It's true.
it is interesting.
Well, those that have money have met more walls for art and more homes to put them in, et cetera, et cetera. But that requires that you have a beeline to that community, or that you have a network of representatives who have a client base that can handle that. It's really challenging. I've always been intrigued by the scrolls that some artists are known to love to make. And there's a narrative that's implied somehow when there's a left and a right, when there's instead of the whole, and that's fascinating to me, especially if they can scroll back in. Even David Taylor's book that unfolded, literally the accordion fold, the line part of the book, working the line, it has a home. It retracts in a sense back in, but it could be shown all expanded. It could be shown on the wall in its format as a book.
Join us on the next episode of Camera Position for the final part of our conversation with Mary Virginia Swanson, where I ask her about the importance of story in photography.
I'm drawn to it. I'm partial to it. I look for it. I learn from it. Is it essential?